the Mets had a possible deal during the winter meetings. They were talking to Kansas City about sending Starling Marte, taking on parts of the contract. In exchange, the Mets also get Hunter Harvey, who is a pretty good reliever who I'm pretty sure they acquired at the deadline, right?
Yep. He was bad and got hurt.
From the Nationals. So again, we all know the Nationals have developed some really good relievers, some really explosive relievers. So maybe that could have been a really good value deal. I'm actually upset that report came out because that would have been awesome for me personally. You all know how much I really want Starling Marte to be gone, and Hunter Harvey would have been a really good bullpen depth piece, and maybe they could elevate it in that way, move some of these arms that have been inconsistent down the pecking order. It just didn't happen in that regard. Speaking of those bats, they did bring in a bat, and that being Jesse Winker. We talked about this live when it did happen. It was kind of overshadowed by the whole news with Pete Alonso and how that went on. But when it comes to Jesse Winker, the Mets outfield depth chart gets a little bit deeper, even though he's not known for his glove, but it gives you another outfield option. It seems like the Mets still looking at that outfield market because we've talked about, Jerickson Profar before, Santander went, of course, other guys out there that maybe they try to plug in, but I'd say that Profar is probably the most likely. But Jesse Winker has made it public for this entire saga since 2019. Love Mets fans. He's back and forth with them. It's like this friendly, brother and sister, brother banter back and forth. And he loved being here. We obviously know he loves the big atmosphere and the big stage. I think we can all say, fill in the blank right here, it's a match made in heaven. Jesse Winker is back on a 1-year, $7.5 million contract. It has up to $1.5 million in incentives, a $1 million signing bonus. And as for with adding Jesse Winker back into the fold, the Mets outfield depth chart gets a lot deeper, and then also it brings up some question with some players. Juan Soto coming in with his mega deal. I think he's going to start on this team. If he doesn't, it'll be kind of weird. Brandon Nimmo, who most likely will be just playing left field. You have Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri, who will most likely split time in center field. Starling Marte is here, who did not play a great outfield, but most likely will be looked at as a DH right now, which is the only concern that we've talked about of bringing back Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker can also play the outfield. So you have 6 viable outfielders of their primary position outside of DH. If they were to DH, maybe Brandon Nimmo gets a few DHs because of the health scare that he had last year. You never know. We'll see. Maybe he slows it down in spring training as he usually does, and maybe they ease him in with the DH. Who knows? Other options, of course, we know Jeff McNeil has played the outfield before. Luis Angel Acuna has talked about as a possibility to play the outfield. He played it in the minors many times. And then another guy on the 40-man roster named Jose Azocar, who I don't know if is going to be on the roster. I know some people don't even know who that is, but they did claim him off of waivers last year from the Padres. And of course, potential MLB debuts in 2025. That being Drew Gilbert, all depending on if he can stay healthy, his reps in AAA. You never know. Now, obviously, Jesse Winker coming back fills in more of the DH fully healthy when it comes to the Mets roster. But then that also leads the possibility of Starling Marte being the guy against lefties at DH, who we've talked about that being more of a concern.
Yeah, we talked about Winker last week, like you mentioned. But for me, the real thing that I'm focused more on is the Marte thing after, like we were talking about earlier with the potential deal with Kansas City that kind of fell through. The fact that became public, I feel that, like we talked about how you should trade Marte. Now I feel like you have to trade Marte. The fact that went public, I feel like those are the kind of things that could ruffle feathers in locker rooms, where Starling Marte is like, you guys wanted to trade me. Everyone knows you wanted to trade me. Why am I here when you guys don't want me to be on this team? So I feel like now you have to trade Starling Marte, and whatever you get for that, if you could get bullpen help, great. But if you could just even get some young players, like we talked about high upside guys, like Andrew's talked about in other videos, but maybe the guys who were big time prospects, but they haven't panned out, or like guys that you think you could develop, or you could make some changes so that they can become like these Stearns reclamation projects, like trade Marte for reclamation projects. Number one, you free up money to then you could also sign more relievers and things like that. But two, I just feel like those are the kind of things that could mess up a clubhouse, is when you're saying that, we're trying to trade players and it doesn't go through, and the guy just has to kind of stick around, and you're just stuck with him.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that could, and he's not going to be playing either. Like, that leads to a big time disgruntled player when you're getting paid 20 million to sit on the bench. Like, it's just not a great look at all.
Trust me, I know about that firsthand. If you're a Rangers fan and you know who we're talking about, of a certain contract of a guy that was almost traded in the offseason and ended up playing through the season and coming back and winding his way all the way back. Maybe there is a way, but right now it just seems like he kind of fits into the formula already of Jesse Winker does this against righties, and then Starling Marte is against lefties, which, again, I don't want. We've talked about that as the only fear of bringing back Jesse Winker. It has nothing to do with Jesse Winker, and I think Jesse Winker would deepen the lineup very well. It is seen as a platoon right now, and it's a very weak platoon. It really is a weak platoon when you look at it, because Jesse Winker does have a good hitting profile, gives you good quality of contact, doesn't have amazing power, but maybe at his best can give 15 to 20, which, to be honest, it is good from the left side. He can give you a productive DH type of campaign. When it comes to Starling Marte from the right side, he can give you singles against left-handed pitching. That's what he's been able to do ever since he came back from that injury he sustained in the middle of the year. And then you also have the injury concern, so he's playing half games, and then he has the other half. Again, I just don't see the value here. And that's the main reason as to why I'm good with Jerickson Profar, because that probably would etch Marte out unless Marte is looking to play first base. I just feel like you have to continue to make these moves as to where Starling Marte just gets completely put down, the food chain here. I feel like when you look at this overall depth chart right now, you have enough outfielders as to where Jeff McNeil most likely will be coming back. So it's not like I would love to get rid of him too. But if you're looking at viable outfield options that have played it recently, McNeil, I don't think is a viable defensive outfielder given his arm, but in utility reasons, he's a better fit than Marte, who is one of the worst defensive outfielders, probably the worst. You have Winker there, who maybe plays left or right field or something. Siri and Tate, like, you have at least two guys for each position in a pinch. And that leaves out Starling Marte, which, again, from DHs, he would be the weakest DH out of anybody. That's just not the way I would field a championship roster that's going in that just signed Juan Soto. I feel like there's just a better way in order to do something like that. It only makes sense that the Mets were to trade Starling Marte. And my only fear right now, like we always say, is that it's just going to be a platoon with him and Winker, which I don't want. And on the last year of the deal, we've talked about it years ago of him being the Granderson deal, or being the Granderson. They traded Granderson in the last year of his contract. So if we want to continue that step of that, I would do it. And it seems like Frank just said, you kind of have to do it now that went out publicly.
You start from like a center and you move out. You got two guys that can go get it, because your corner positions are going to be, two guys who, one guy we know is not a great defender and he's league average, and Nemo, who's coming off a bad defensive year, obviously playing on one foot probably ain't going to be good for outfield defense. And then you bring Jesse Winker in again, who's another guy who's not the greatest defender, and then we all know Marte has deteriorated to just a body at this point, and he's not providing you any value besides singles, like you said. But the fear we all had is, okay, we bring Winker back. Cool, yes, in a pinch, could you put him in left field? Sure. On Juan Soto's day off, maybe you make Soto DH. You stick him in right because he has a great arm. But again, he's not a guy that we want in the outfield every day. So if he's the DH, and like you said, Starling Marte is still here. And again, you look around, and I keep saying, you look around the teams that are trying to win championships, they don't have the platoon DH. They have a DH. And again, we're going into another year where we're going with this platoon, and it's a worse platoon because, again, Starling Marte is a part of it. If you bring in Jerickson Profar, again, who's a solid defender, yes, and then you can make Winker, the righty. Is he going to maybe be the left-handed DH and play, the kind of revolving role? I think that could be more appealing. But again, like you said, Starling Marte needs to be off this roster. And again, they made it public. Hey, we want to get this guy to a better fit. I think that was what Salmon or Ragazzo, whoever the report came out, is, let's get you a better fit. Well,
both the Missouri teams, it's a good
fit.
fit.
Exactly. Send him to fucking Midwest at this point.
But I think that he really is, at this point, the odd man out. And listen, this is not the worst situation to have, because remember, the Mets had many, many DH options on this team in 2022. And, because they seem to look at like Alvarez as a DH towards the end of the season, Vogelbach, Ruff, all of these other guys who were here. It seemed like they had a lot of DHs that don't provide that much flexibility. You look at this. Overall, we know that Soto, who is 26 years old, who knows if the defense gets better or not. Brandon Nimmo, who be a little bit more limited as compared to the center fielder that we paid for 2 years ago. Tyrone Taylor's there. Jose Siri, both great athletes, both overall really good range in center field. Winker can play the outfield in a pinch, which is a little bit more flexibility in that regard. Then you get to Starling Marte, who is there were many times when the Mets lost games because of Starling Marte's defense. They have lost many runs extending the inning because of Starling Marte's defense. It doesn't seem like, again, to me, it doesn't seem like a player that David Stearns would want to keep on his team for 2025 going into a 36-year-old season, but it also looks like a contract that he doesn't seem to be able to get rid of, or at least cover part of, because it seems like the last of these talks of it was during the winter meetings, and the deal fell through, which I would have been so happy if that happened. You have no idea, because Hunter Harvey is a solid arm, and then we would have been able to clear up a roster space for Starling Marte. And again, I understand how great Starling Marte overall as a signing has been, but going forward, we've talked about this, going forward, same thing with Pete Alonso, going forward, the upside, there really isn't much there. I'm going to make this, or I'm going to guarantee you this. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You can clown me. Starling Marte, if he is on the roster still and spring training starts, 100% we are going to get an injury notice from him on the first day of spring training. I know it's going to happen because, again, when we go into spring training, first day, we always get this news of, oh, who's hurt? They come in here, they come into camp hurt. I 100% believe that Starling Marte is going to have some kind of a complication. There's going to be some kind of a report on that. I'm not hoping that it is. But again, in regards to his trade value, which is not much, if you can get a reliever in exchange for him and cover some of the contract, I'm not hoping that he's hurt, because again, the best Starling Marte is a great Starling Marte, a great impactful Starling Marte. But recently, we're not talking about a Starling Marte that is very impactful. In fact, we're talking about a Starling Marte that was a negative impact defensively and overall at the plate, where he just was one of the problems of these right-handed batters waving at sliders in the other's batter's box. Maybe that does limit when he's facing just lefties, but you're going to pay him $20 million to do that?
I do have something on the Arenado thing, and that was spoken about down here. And the fact that obviously Mozeliak has outright said his number 1, 2, 3 in priorities are getting rid of Arnold and Arenado. But there were some things down here, sports radio just yapping, how sports radio does. And the Mets were brought up because Arenado, he was on that original list. And the fact that St. Louis's outfield is so fucking ass. It's Lars Nootbaar, a noodle of speed demon if it's Michael Siniani or Victor Scott. And they don't really have a left fielder right now. There was a thought because of maybe taking on the Marte deal. The 1 year of Marte, stick him in left field in St. Louis, where Arenado would go to the Mets, obviously pay some money down. I think they projected they pay the deferral payments out, and the Mets would get Arenado. The Cardinals would take on Marte, and I think they wanted a sweetener, they said a low level pitcher like Tyler McGill. They were just yapping. Again, this was just kind of what the St. Louis radio sphere was talking about. And then even Evan brought it up on his podcast. And it's true. I mean, it's an idea because St. Louis one isn't going to sign anybody. Plus, they need an outfield. I mean, again, Jordan Walker can play the outfield. I think they want to get Walker back on the infield. Like they want Gorman to play third to move Arenado to open up that position, even if it's for Walker as well. So, could that 1 year of $20 million, let's say you even out some of the money with Arenado, would that be kind of how I've said it all the time when I talked about the Marte videos? 2 bad contracts, But the other team needs that need where the other one needs that. Where the Mets need a third baseman, the Cardinals need an outfielder. Again, there might be some sweeteners and lesser, but that was kind of the basis of that we're talking about. Is hey, Mozeliak just takes this 1 year out, it gets out of longer term money in Arenado, and they get out of it early. Well, the Mets, yes, they have to take on. Then the Cardinals will pay the deferral money, which would be the Mets whatever 60. On the actual deal would have been like what 66 million or something like that. Where the Cardinals pick up the deferred money and then they take the Marte money on to move Arenado to the Mets, and then you got a sweetener. So that was something that was kind of circling. I wouldn't say it's going to happen, but at least it maybe has been brought up in Mozeliak's circle as well. So that was just something. Nothing. Down Mets and Arenado. It was an idea that was brought up that could potentially fill 2 holes for each team. Fill a hole.
I get it, a need for need type of thing, because it seems like the Cardinals want to compete, or they think they can compete.
They just want to get younger. They just want to get.
They want to get younger. So Starling Marte probably would not.
But
be
again,
the
it's
target.
their thinking. Their thinking is they get out of money faster. They get out after the year.
Yeah.
The Mets get the longer term money. That's what they would be. All right, we'll take the 1 year on. You take the 3 years of Arenado and the deferrals or whatever, $3 million a year